Well, thank you for that. It's quite fascinating when I hear my introduction. I almost feel I'm at my funeral because they're saying all these good things about you, and I'm still optimistic. Every once in a while, I still go buy green bananas, hoping they can get ripe at home while I'm still alive. The resume maybe needs a little updating. I think it's now 75 countries. But aside from all of that, I was asked to talk about empathy and compassion, so maybe let me reintroduce myself to you. I'm Anila's husband and Nick's dad. That was a blessing. Everything else is a choice. Mary Crowley said, "You are free up until the moment of choice. Then the choice controls the chooser." Now, the one person who would be the most happy today to see this is living in Vizag right now, my almost 90-year-old father. Being a son of the soil, 2 boys born in the family, my brother is an engineer. What did my dad want me to be? Enter the medical space. Well, there are 2 things I'm not good at: blood and sick people. I'd have made a horrible doctor. I'd have motivated you, but you'd still die. So I'm in awe that I get to stand in front of people of such caliber, people who have taken on the profession of nursing, of teaching, of medicine, of invention, of care. But I want to take you through a narrative that is fairly simple. I've crisscrossed the globe, and I want to bring something home to you that's very simple. None of us can go back and make a brand new beginning, but all of us can start now and make a fantastic ending. So wherever you are in your journey, just sit back, relax, we'll have some fun. And my fun has a little anecdotes, maybe a little physical interaction. I'll speak for about maybe 35 minutes, and then we'll entertain some questions. But before I want to make sure I'm communicating with you. So just raise your right hand for me like this, right hand. Now put it slowly on your chin. For those of you who missed, the chin is this pointed thing at the end of the face. And I know I have my work cut out for me. What you did was react to that which you saw, instead of respond to that which you believe. Reaction is based on life's possibles. Response is based on God-given permissibles. And one of the things we miss out is 97% of the people in this world navigate through life in the comfort zone, good, honest, tax-paying, law-abiding. 3% propel to the effective zone. The difference between comfort and effectiveness is growth. Throughout human history, growth has been uncomfortable. So one of the things that I want to put in your mind is a parallel thought. A thought that was put into my mind some years ago because I thought I was a colossal failure and a disappointment to my family because I couldn't get into medical school. I couldn't pass any exam because I had very low grades in my BCom. Part of it was my own doing. Part of it was I had no interest in academia. Now, since I graduated business school in 1984, without error, I can tell you that I have read at least 1 book on average every week now for the last 35 years. My discipline requires me to wake up every morning at 4 o'clock. I write for a half hour, I read for a half hour, and I maybe go back to bed for another hour. But what that does is it allows me now to wake up at 7 with input that I just put in at 6. While the rest of the world is waking up with input they put in last night, and it's not even a fair game. I'm in the effective zone. I'm already marching ahead. Sybil Stanton wrote a book called The 25-Hour Woman. In that she said, discipline is not on your back, needling you with imperatives, negative. Discipline is at your side, encouraging you with incentives, positive. To which I'd like to add, the day you make yourself a slave to discipline, the world will become your oyster. Now, there are people in this audience just looking chronologically. Some of you have had more birthdays than me. Some of you younger ones are wondering how old I am. I just recently celebrated the 41st anniversary of my 20th birthday. For the mathematically challenged, I'm 61. So this applies to both Like you, my dad was sitting in one of these events in Hyderabad, I'm venturing to guess, oh, good 18 years ago. He had retired very successfully as an executive, but like you, had to take on responsibility. He took on responsibility that came familially. He took on responsibility that came because of societal pressure. He got married to my mom, who was very young. He had to support a family. So Dad abandoned his educational quest after an undergraduate with a botany major, BSc third class, Avian College, 1955. Through hard work and determination, he rose to the top, but there was one nagging doubt. Is there anything left for me to do? How do you get empathy? How do you get compassion? When your vision begins to tell you that there is more to you than what you have already done, and more to you than what the world will let you accomplish. Here's the statement. When your obligations to others finish, your obligations to your dreams remain. And Dad took that to heart, stood up in the room and said to me, son, is there hope for me? I said, what do you want to do, Dad? He said, I want to go back and get an education and finish that part, which I never got to do. I took care of my sisters, I took care of my family, I took care of everybody. At the age of 75, we went to Andhra University with my father's BSc degree and asked them if he could get a seat in the MA program. And they said, with those grades and that much longevity passing, he has to take an entrance exam. So Pop took the entrance exam and passed it. He got a seat in the MA program when he was 75 years old. At the age of 77, he graduated near the top of his class with a master's in philosophy. Then he petitioned the university for a seat on the PhD program. And they said, we cannot give you a seat on the PhD program because people of your age, what will they do with it? We have other people who are research fellows and we need to have them do something. So Dad prepared a 50-page dossier. He said, I started my life studying under a street light at Avian College in Visakhapatnam. My first son is an engineer who runs a marine consulting firm in Norway. My second son is the vice president of one company, president of two companies, and has crisscrossed the globe. If anybody in this town has earned the right to get a PhD at Andhra University, it's me, because both my boys are products of this university. And reluctantly, the vice chancellor of Andhra University gave my dad special provision to become a research fellow at the age of 79. At the age of 82, my dad got his PhD. Now, he convinced Mom to go along with him for the ride, and took her along with him. So before Amma died at the age of 77, at the age of 75, she got her master's. And both my father and mother graduated at the same convocation. He with his PhD, she with her master's. Now here's the interesting thing. When my dad asked, how long will it take? They said, oh, most people take about 4 years to get the PhD. He said, what is the earliest you can get it that you would allow me to do it? They said 2.5 is the minimum. So he set a date. He put that date on my calendar. He says, I'm going to get it done, and in 2.5 years, I want you in India because you propelled this journey, and I want you to walk with me as we submit my thesis. You know what was his second goal? On the top of Andhra University Philosophy Department, the first name is Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishna. My dad wanted to be on that board. He missed it by one. He's the first name on the next board. All this to say that wherever you are in your journey, it's okay to dream. It's okay to have hope. Wherever you are chronologically, it doesn't matter. So I'll introduce you to some people, and here are the 4 motifs I want to present for you. First, learn to live your life, live your day by the clock, but your life with a vision. Live your day by the clock, but your life with a vision. There is more intellect in this room that the world needs. Second, realize that yesterday ended with last night, but today is the first day of the rest of your life. Third, other people can give you pleasure, but you will never find true happiness until you learn to do something for someone else. Fourth, you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. Now, these are all principles that have been tried and proven, and so now let me introduce you to some real-life characters. There's some of you in the nursing profession, you'll like this story. A little girl by the name of Annie, we'll call her Little Annie, grew up as a ward of the state. She and her brother were shuttled from one foster home to another. And as a result, she grew increasingly violent because she had regressed in her personality. She became abusive, and then they had to confine her to a cellar in the basement of a hospital in Massachusetts. An elderly lady used to just say, love is spelled T-I-M-E. Love is spelled time. So the elderly lady who said that there is no kid on God's green earth who can be relegated to an animal status and caged because of her behavior, started leaving a glass of milk and some cookies and would sit outside the cage and just say, you are special, God loves you. And just through that approach, Annie's behavior began to change. Somehow, miraculously, when she turned 12, the doctor said, she's made a complete recovery. She can now be released as normal into society. Annie said, I've spent my entire life as a ward of the state. Half my life I've been in this hospital. What will I do outside? Can I do something in the hospital? So they allowed her to stay as a volunteer within the hospital to help other kids and all that. As she grew older, she went to Perkins and began to master the ability of sign language because she had some problem with her own eyesight. Then the call came. The call came from Alabama that there was a young 3-year-old girl who was getting incorrigible and the family could not manage her. This kid, suddenly at the age of 3, had lost both sight and sound. So Annie was sent to be a nanny to this little kid in Alabama. Now remember this, little Annie, who grew up in the foster care system, had gone to Perkins and mastered sign language. How do you sign to someone who's blind and deaf? So she had to create a new language of compassion and empathy. She started tracing feelings and numbers into the palm of that other girl. And then would introduce her to the physical characteristics. So she would show the word water and put her hand under water. Would show the word doll and then let her hold a doll. Many years later, when Helen Keller was receiving the highest award by the Queen of England and was asked, to what do you attribute your remarkable contribution to humanity, having been diagnosed at the age of 3 with a debilitating blindness and complete deafness? Helen Keller said, if it wasn't for little Annie, the great Anne Sullivan, nobody would have known Helen Keller. Into your path will come people with different issues. Into your path will come people with different conditions. They rely on you for service, they rely on you for treatment, they rely on you for cure. For that you have your education. You understand the process of how to curate. You understand the procedure because that's what you've trained on. You understand the protocol because that's what the hospital prescribes. But that common sense ability to connect, the very human element, is what makes that ultimate difference. Not because you want to change the world. You cannot be everything to everyone. But for every day, for someone, you are all they have. And that light switch, when it's flipped, amazing things will happen. I remember when I had achieved my dream of standing on a stage with giants. I spoke in the Georgia Dome in Atlanta, 35,000 people in the audience. The speaker in front of me was Jimmy Carter, this former president of the United States. The speaker after me was Rudy Giuliani, former mayor of New York. Little immigrant kid, I went to America with $9 in my pocket. Suddenly, I'm in the midst of giants. But I have lived my life with one principle. I am not scared of authority. I respect it, but I don't fear it. With integrity, you have nothing to fear because you have nothing to hide. I respect authority, but I don't cede to it unnecessarily just on the basis of age or accomplishment. Here's the principle. I believe I belong wherever I'm placed. Here's why. Right now on planet Earth, there are about 8.25 billion people. And God in His infinite wisdom made only one you. With your genetic structure, your cheekbones, your hair, your looks, your ideas, there's not another on planet Earth who is exactly like you. Which means when you came about through your mother's womb and arrived on planet Earth, the mold was broken at that precise moment that never again, whether you believe in random time plus matter plus chance or you believe in divine ordination, there is not another like you. One of the number one principles of hope, Alfred Adler, the great psychologist, said hope is the foundational quality of all change. Eric Hoffer, change agent, said, in times of change, it is the learners who will inherit the earth, while the learned will find themselves beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists. I'll give you a funny story. There's this guy who was not a doctor, probably like me, decided that his career required an awakening, so he decided to move to a small town and call himself a doctor. So he put up a sign outside and he says, Dr. Geezer, and Geezer just means old man. He says, Dr. Geezer, if I can cure you, it'll be 500 rupees. If I cannot cure you, I'll give you 1,000. So there was a young guy who said, this fellow is conning us. Now I want you to introduce yourself into the mind of that young man because inside of everyone is a skeptic. I've talked for about 10 minutes and many of you are already rationalizing in your head, yeah, that'll work for him, it'll never work for me. That worked for someone else, it won't work here. That worked in America, it won't work in India. That's the skeptic in us. So this youngster went to the doctor and he says, Doc, I'm losing my taste. And the doctor said, oh, that's easy. Nurse, and she wasn't a real nurse either. He says, nurse, I want you to go to bucket number 23, get 2 drops of the liquid and put it in the patient's mouth. As soon as he did that, he says, oh my God, that's petrol. He says, congratulations. You got your taste back. That'll be 500. Now realizing he had been conned, he decided to wait a while. And that is so akin to our human condition. We think if we just resist long enough, eventually it'll be a Tarzan swing and it'll go away. That's called living in perpetual anticipatory grief. It didn't happen, but I expect to happen. Something bad's about to happen. My mom lived her life that way. When I wrote my first book, I called her, I said, Amma, I wrote my first book. She said, don't tell anybody, you'll have bad luck. I said, Amma, you don't tell anybody when you read a book. You tell everybody when you write one. It's common sense. Anyhow, this guy decides to go back to the doc, the fake doc, about a month later. He says, Doc, I'm losing my memory. I seem to be forgetting stuff. The doc said, oh, that's easy. He says, nurse, go to bucket number 23 and bring 2 drops of the liquid. He says, oh, no, you don't. That's petrol. He says, congratulations. You got your memory back. That'll be another 500. Now he's sure he'd been had, so he waited a couple of weeks, another month, and went back a 3rd time. This time it was simple. He says, Doc, I'm losing my sight, my vision. And the doc said, I don't have a cure for that. Here's your 1,000. He said, that's only 500. Congratulations, you got your vision back. And the premise is, it's a simple illustration, and it's obviously made up. But the reality is, how long do we go through life looking through a keyhole with both eyes because we are that narrow-minded? I'm going to posit a statement here today, and I want you to think about it for yourself. If tradition is your only strategy, culture is your only formula. If tradition is your only strategy, culture is your only formula. What will people think? I married a girl from the north, and proverbially the Hindi word is log kya kahenge. 40 saal se dhoond raha hu, I haven't found these log. Wo khud apne log ko dhoond raha hai. Nobody cares. Just because you hold your breath, the universe doesn't suffocate. 80% of the people do not care that you have a problem. The other 20% are really happy it's you. 100% don't care. So why then do we walk around looking like the picture on our driver's license? Happiness, which is what we are conditioned to by culture and tradition. You need to be happy. Baloney. Happiness depends on happenings. It's event-based. But joy is undiluted, it's unadulterated, it's pure. Albert Schweitzer won a Nobel Prize in 1952 for his philosophy of science. But as early as 1904, he wanted to go serve the people in the northwestern part of Africa, modern-day Gabon. And when he approached the people at the missionary society, they're saying, I want to go there. They said, you have to be a medical doctor. At the age of 30, he went back to school, became a medical doctor, went and set up a clinic in Gabon, which still operates till today. And late in his life, this man was born in the region of Alsace. Late in his life, after he won the Nobel Prize for something totally different than what his life's work was, someone asked him this question, how goes it, Dr. Schweitzer? He said, my sight is waning, but my vision is clearer than ever. Pablo Casals was 90 when he was practicing his cello one day. He'd already become an international cello master. And a reporter went up to him and said, why do you keep practicing? He said, I think I'm making progress. Matty Stepanek was 7 when he appeared on Larry King Live the first time, knowing he had an advanced case of a muscular dystrophic condition for which there was no cure. And Matty Stepanek eventually succumbed to that at the age of 14. But by the time he died at the age of 14, he had written 7 books on award-winning poetry. It's not how old you are. It's not what gender you are. It's not what role you undertake. It's not what you do. It's who you are. Once those premises come to place, common sense becomes common practice. So, let me introduce you to another person, Harry Winston. Harry Winston was a diamond merchant in New York. In fact, even till today, when you go around to some of the more popular metropolitan areas, you'll see a Harry Winston showroom. It was known that he had the greatest diamonds. One day, one of his prized investors came into his building and looked at some diamonds. And when they looked at the diamonds, the investor was talking to this little man. And at the end of the conversation, the investor left. Harry Winston went up to the investor and said, I only produced the best. Why didn't you buy? He says, well, let me think about it. At which point Harry Winston began to explain the clarity, the cut, the carat of the diamond, and the investor bought. Winston then asked the investor the question, how come you didn't buy when my aide talked to you, but you bought when I talked to you? One of the most revealing statements, I think, in human psychology is what Winston said. My aide knows diamonds. I love them. My aide knows diamonds. I love them. Fast forward to COVID, during the mask and task time, the entire world shut down for the very first time. I was in Albania, I had to scramble out of there to get back to the US. I have a doctor friend who I consulted on a regular basis because I wanted scientific updates, not just philosophical mindset or people arguing on TV. I understand there's one channel where the nation wants to know, but shouting doesn't let me know anything. So I said, I'll call my doctor friend. He's qualified. He's got patience. He's a great diagnostician as far as my own journey was concerned. And I said, how are you coping with it? He says, oh, well, you know, my practice is almost, I'm at the tail end of my career. I just look after about 25 or 30 of my regulars. I do the hospital stuff, but my own private practice, I only have about 25 or 30. I said, how many of them contracted it? He says, oh, about 7. I said, what did you do? He said, first, I thought I'd treat them unconventionally as a doctor. I would show my empathy in one simple way. I bought them all an iPad. And before I went in wearing my protective equipment, because obviously I take the disease seriously, I showed them my face. I wanted them to see the smiling healer that they had always known and trusted in the confines of my own exam room. When they saw that I was smiling and talking to them not through the hiss and the ventilator and all the sound, half their anxiety went away, even though they were strapped to a ventilator. After I finished treating them, I went back out and took my mask and all off and FaceTimed them again. They needed to see my face. I said, what was the difference? He said, some of them were serious, some of them not. The statistics I didn't really bear out. But one thing I did realize was, in spite of their agony, they smiled when I smiled. And that is something that I have seen throughout human history in a lot of the situations. Even when I walk on Tank Bund in the morning, I always stay at the Courtyard by Marriott here. That's my go-to place. And I always walk in the morning. I smile at random strangers, and believe it or not, they perk up. Just try it. Here's another thing you can try. I know it's unconventional, but earthquakes and hurricanes get all the publicity. Termites do more damage. You can make radical changes in minute steps. Now, I'm not saying grin from ear to ear like you've eaten a banana sideways. That's insanity. But at least a little pep in your step, a little bounce to your ounce. Before we take on the skill that allows us to make a living, we have to implore and employ ourselves in the will that allows us to shape a life. When skill and will come together for the very first time, you become a 24-hour champion. So how do you participate that will? How do you smile randomly at someone? If somebody asks you how you're doing, what is our standard response? How are you doing? Fine. Fine is a grade of sandpaper. It's not a human response. What does fine mean? Can anybody define? No. But we say fine. Good under the circumstances. I've never met anybody over the circumstances. They're always under the circumstances. I'm doing great since it's Friday. What happened? Oh, all week I had to deal with people. Yeah, the tragedy. Or better yet, when you interview someone, you've seen the yokels do this. Tell me about yourself.